Well, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon and good evening in India. We are honored and delighted to have India's ambassador to the US, uh, Taranjit Singh Sandhu, as our keynote guest for today. And also, I'm delighted to have John, uh, chairman and one of the founding members of USISPF, also, and then the startup companies with whom I'm going to introduce later on. I think it's important to understand the relationship between India and US is much more pivotal now than ever before. Be it change in geopolitical scenario, be it change in companies, US companies looking for China plus one strategy, be it startups, be it on the energy security, or focus on the job environment. The relationship is much more important and pivotal, and both countries and its people depend on each other to make each other mutually successful. It is important today as India is looking at some of the border issues with China, as India is looking at creating startup scenes in the US, and US companies are looking at a trade deal with India to have better access and level playing field for the Indian market itself. It is important to understand, for example, on a supply chain, why it is important to have a secure supply chain. Today, India provides roughly 30% of the generic drug to the US market, which brings over $20 billion savings to US government. The challenge here is of the 30% generic drug being provided by India to the US, almost 90% of the API comes from China to India itself. So we need to make sure that that supply chain is secure because these are critical drugs being supplied to the US. On the energy side, if you look at last 3 years ago, India was importing almost zero energy from the US. And today those numbers have gone up in the tens of billions of dollars, supporting US energy company, not only just on the oil side, but on the coal side and also on the renewable side. And we believe that the relationship and cooperation on energy is critical, and you will see that moving forward itself. But more important, today both countries face a challenge. India has a challenge of 125 unemployed individuals due to the lockdown, and US has a number of almost 40 million people, unprecedented between the two countries itself. And I think that's where the startup will play a very pivotal role in job creation, innovation, and cross-border trade itself. Our focus today is how do we basically leverage the energy of the entrepreneurs on both sides of the waters? How do we basically leverage the capital coming from the US? And how do we basically leverage large corporations leveraging the startup technology to make them much more efficient and effective on a global environment? So keeping that in mind, I'd like to basically once again say thank you to the ambassador, to John and other speakers, and invite them to this session. On that note, I'm going to invite the co-chair of the US-India Startup Initiative, Umesh Sachdev, to give his opening remarks. Umesh?
Thank you, Mukesh, and greetings to everyone who's joined from around the world. I want to start by reiterating some of the very strong points that Mukesh just made. There is a very fundamental tie between US and India. Our common belief in the education and the power of education, our exemplary belief in the role of technology in uplifting societies, and fundamentally two of the largest democracies in the world. There is strong reasons for historic relations between US and India. But there's one new emerging reason which will cement these ties and take us into the future of our relationships. We are talking about the world's largest and the world's third largest startup ecosystem now. The two countries, the two economies are two of the most prolific startup ecosystems and startup activities that happen in any place on this earth. If I just look at the potential that Indian startups have, we have 50,000 registered startups in India, of which 8,900 are in technology alone. The magnitude and opportunity for US and India coming together in terms of startups and harnessing the power is at a level which you've never seen before. It is no surprise that the trade between US and India jumped to about $160 billion in 2019, up from about $142 billion in 2018. From my own personal journey, I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Unifor, which is an artificial intelligence company founded in Chennai in India, inside of IIT Madras, a university in India, 12 years ago. After setting the base for many years in India, I finally had the opportunity to expand the business and make US our new global headquarters a few years ago, and that unlocked unprecedented opportunities for me. In this journey, I came across many like me in the US-India corridor who have scaled up their startups and have tremendous common learnings and common initiative to come together and join forces to accelerate this activity of US-India startups. As co-chair of this program today, I'm proud to announce the USISPF Startup Connect program that we rolled out a few months ago. At this point, we said this is a program under USISPF, which is by entrepreneurs and for entrepreneurs. We have put together a coalition of some of the top business-to-business startups to begin with in US and India. Some of these are the most prolific, including Freshworks, Mindtickle, Unifor, CloudCherry, and CRM Next. What we want to do together is use our collective brain power and network, engage with policymakers and business leaders to create a positive impact, which will accelerate this startup activity and hopefully go on to impact what we all do in the future. Our motto is when one of us succeeds, all of us succeeds. What we are trying to achieve here is engage with policymakers in both sides to accelerate startup activity, which ultimately will be the engine of job creation in both US and India, develop local economies in both countries, and fundamentally drive higher trade. Through 3 programs, which are growth and job creation, policy engagement, and ecosystem engagement, we know what we're trying to achieve would have been just impossible if only one of us was trying to make this impact. We as a collective group of some of the top startups that you're going to see in sessions today, under the USISPF umbrella, have an opportunity to make a positive change. Our goal that we've set out for ourselves for now, and in true entrepreneur founder fashion, we've said in the coming years, we want 1,000 such startups in the US-India corridor, creating at least 5,000 jobs in the US and many times more in India to have nurtured through this program. With that, I'd request a small video to be played, which introduces the program and the initial group of startups, which is just the initial group, and I promise there are many more to come.
If you watch the most strategic partnership in the world between any 2 countries, it's the US and India. And if you watch the major job creation engine, both in India and in the US, will be startups. But the exciting thing is, through Startup Connect, you get the startups in India working with the startups in the US startups working with the startups in India, and the benefit to government and citizens across the board.
Unifor is a conversational AI company where we use AI and automation to disrupt customer service around the world.
CloudCherry is a customer experience management platform that helps brands track, measure, and improve customer experience.
CRM Next is a startup that was started in India. It's CRM for banks. It's really all about work simplification and robotic automation, helping the people within the banks serve customers more effectively.
Freshworks is a next-generation customer engagement software company. We have more than 200,000 customers across 126 countries.
At Mindtickle, we have created a SaaS-based B2B readiness platform. What it does is it helps companies to enable their customer-facing teams to be much more productive.
From a phase of doing business for India to be a company that goes after global domination, of which US is a big part, Hence, US plays a major role in our leadership and our thought and strategy overall.
Well, I moved with one suitcase, a cricket kit, and one customer in North America. So it obviously was a bit of a punt. Happened not more than 3 years ago. And since then, we managed to build local teams in the Bay and in Salt Lake City, get local customers, get funded by local investors, and ultimately exit it. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind.
Building a foundation team here in the U.S. and really picking our locations, East Coast and West Coast to best serve the country, getting our first customers on board here, and really building that communication dynamic and service delivery dynamic.
We hired our first US employee in 2014 and had our first US office in the Bay Area in 2015.
And we hired a set of basic 4 or 5 people at sales, marketing, the product and support still being done from India. And that's how we just got started and got the company kicked off in US in 2015.
Challenges around first being ahead of your time in doing technology with everyone would say you're crazy.
So hiring great talent and getting it right in the first shot is probably the hardest challenge for a cross-border founder.
The inavailability of L1 and B1 visas in the past 3 years has caused a pretty significant challenge in that easy movement of people between the US organization and India.
We have to process customer credit card every month, and so it's important to have it on file. When we started in India, the RBI regulations made it tough for us to do this. We had to incorporate in the US in order to solve for this particular issue, which I believe still continues to exist.
Finding your first wins, finding the trust. How can people connect with you because you are coming from a completely different geography? So there are a lot of those scaling up challenges.
We just said today that the defining relationship of the 21st century is between US and India, driven by startups. And through the USISPF Startup Connect program, we wish to lead the way and make it happen into a reality in the next 2 to 3 years.
Getting the right biz dev opportunities, getting the right help with hiring talent, getting partnerships. And those are the places where if I were to rewind my journey, I would love an accelerative impact, something that USISPF Startup Connect wants to do.
And we see the opportunity for USISPF to really help the government understand that for every person who rotates into the US, it's helping us hire more quickly, helping us train teams more quickly, and really creating US jobs.
I'm sure that we should be able to contribute and share our experiences and journey and help other people who are moving or going to onboard in that journey.
US-India Strategic Partnership Forum is the enabler for both the disruption that's going to occur in a very positive ways between our countries, but also the job creation and the innovation. But the headline for the startup group is very simple. This is the most important, the most disruptive relationship in a very positive way between any two countries in the world enabled by startups.
Of the Startup Connect program, I once again welcome you all. One of the things that we've been privileged with in this program is to have world-class supporters and advisors backing us up through the way. John Chambers is here with us today, and what a pleasure. John, in his current life, is focusing on backing and supporting disruptive startups, some of the best in the world, and I can say that proudly as one of the beneficiaries of John's JC2 Ventures initiative that he's focused on these days. But as we know, John Chambers was the chairman and CEO of Cisco and is the chairman emeritus, and is also the chairman for the USISPF. Welcome, John.
Umesh, it's a pleasure, and thank you very much. Mukesh, a great start to these sessions. It's a pleasure to be with you today and to see a dream that we outlined almost 5 years ago start to really come true. We outlined the relationship between the US and India, not just being an important one, but potentially the most strategic in the world for both countries, and a model for not just trade, but job creation, innovation, inclusion in a way that had never been done before. And much like the US has seen over the last 2 years, large companies working with startups to help drive their own innovation. We're now saying, let's do that between our two countries at a scale that has never been attempted before, and one that I'm extremely optimistic will be very successful in the future. Today, I have a chance to interview two people that I care greatly about. The first is one of the leading diplomats in the world from India. Ambassador Sandhu, when you look at his background, it is like a perfect resume that if you were right out dreaming coming out of college, what you'd want to be able to do. He's a person that has held the most important positions in the diplomatic corps coming out of India. He started with the former Soviet Union, then evolved to Russia, then went on to Germany, then went on to Sri Lanka and Ukraine. And this is his fourth session in the US. And in each of the sessions in the US, he was there at different stages, which is going to be my actual first question to him, watching what happened during the periods of the 1990s that was very uncertain between our two countries and the direction that we'd be able to do together. He paved the road for President Clinton's visit to India in year 2000. And I talked to President Clinton about how important that was in terms of his formulation of policy between our two countries. He's instrumental in 3 visits by Prime Minister Modi to the United States. And then it was also the prior visit with President Obama. And as you know, President Obama and Prime Minister Modi had a very, very good relationship as well in 2015 when he went there. But today, it's the most strategic relationship we have. It's one that is the most complex relationship in the world between the 2 largest democracies. So please join me in welcoming Ambassador Sandhu to join us today. Mr. Ambassador, it is an honor and thank you for being here. Let me ask you if you would make some opening comments with your thoughts and maybe your objectives for this session. And then if it's okay, it's my honor to do a fireside chat with you without the fair and without being in the same location. So, Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for hosting this event today and your kind words of introduction. And especially coming from you, you are not only a champ in the United States and how much you have done, but especially for our relationship, I think your contribution is unmatched. And we have a deep appreciation of the role which you have played in the past and which you are going to continue playing. We have had a very interesting interactive session with the 5 leading Indian origin startups. E-connecting with everyone through this platform is indeed a pleasure. We are slowly learning to live with the virus. Technology has ensured that the countries remain operational during the period of lockdowns and social distancing. We are effectively using digital connectivity for teleworking, teleeducation, telemedicine, and for digital and contactless payments. Our tech companies have shown the way. They are continuing to innovate in information supply, new digital platforms, and tools for learning. Indian tech companies in the US and their offices across the world have been providing critical behind-the-scenes support to healthcare workers and life science companies. India also takes immense pride in the contribution of doctors, scientists, academicians of Indian origin who came to the United States in the pursuit of academic excellence and have distinguished themselves in diverse fields. The current pandemic has made us recognize the need of collaborations more than ever before. India's partnership with the United States in health sciences and technologies is long-standing. We have closely collaborated in combating diseases such as tuberculosis, cancer, HIV, eye diseases, as well as on environmental health research. Under the India-US Vaccine Action Program, NIH and Indian Department of Biotechnology and ICMR have been collaborating for the last 33 years. From the initial days of the outbreak, our scientists and institutions have been actively engaged in exchange of information. India-US Science and Technology Endowment Fund has called for proposals for COVID-19. virtual networks that will allow India and the US scientists and engineers engaged in the COVID-related research to carry on joint research activities through virtual mechanism and by leveraging current infrastructures and funding mechanisms. Indian pharma companies, which are world leaders in affordable, low-cost medicines and vaccines, are also collaborating with the US companies in vaccine development, therapeutics, and diagnostics. India is working with Gilead to establish a manufacturing base for remdesivir. Similarly, India has been working with the US private sector in vaccine development. The global supply chain disruptions and rapid onset of current health crisis has made it imperative for companies and countries to innovate and respond quickly by changing strategies. Realizing the critical need for PPEs, the central and state governments in India, in collaboration with industry and workers, revamped existing production lines for manufacture of the PPEs in a short span of time. Within 60 days, the PPE industry in India witnessed a 56 times growth, and today India is producing nearly 4.5 lakh PPE kits every single day. We believe that the current pandemic presents an opportunity for India and the United States to further strengthen its close economic partnership. The interest is clearly visible among the industry leaders. The recent investments of US $5.7 billion by Facebook in India's Reliance Jio and the deal between Elias and India's Aditya Birla Group indicates the interest. India's huge domestic market, high-skilled workforce, existing advantages in digital services, along with its competitive tax regime and low labor costs, make it an attractive investment destination. India's ease of doing business rankings have risen from 142 to 63, and we are working to further rise it. In series of announcements recently, Finance Minister of India outlined the economic reforms package. This package, taken together with earlier announcements by the government during COVID crisis and decisions by Reserve Bank of India, is to the tune of 265 million US dollars. That is Indian national rupees of 20 lakhs crores. The package also focuses on land, labor, liquidity, and laws. The idea is to provide an enabling environment to overcome the difficulties posed by abrupt halting of economic activity due to COVID-19, as well as to restart the engines of the economy. Critical reforms have been introduced by the government to promote business and attract investment. The FDI limits in contract manufacturing, defense, and mining have been increased. The recent changes in the insolvency and bankruptcy code, as well as move to decriminalize most of the sections of the Companies Act, where violations are technical or procedure in nature, has brought much needed relief for companies. Targeted incentives packages are there for focus sectors like electronics, pharma API, textile, food processing, medical devices, and electric mobility. We hope to see many fruitful India-US collaborations in the near future. Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, this is John, and I'll jump right into a fireside chat if I can with you. The friendship between our countries has come such a long way over the last 2 decades. Very often, especially the younger people in this session who've never seen an economic downturn before in their business careers, you don't want to jump right into the current situation. You want to take a step back and share with us all just a quick summary of how this relationship, from your perspective, which you saw firsthand in a way that no one else did, with the presidencies going from a almost confrontational relationship to building of trust, to win-win, to what I believe is the most strategic relationship in the world. Can you give us a little bit of color or background on this, and then say, where do you think the relationship is today? And you know where I'm going. Paint the picture for what you think it can be 3 to 5 years out.
Yeah, thank you, John. This relationship, as you have mentioned, and I've had the privilege of seeing, and many of my predecessors actually have also served in similar capacities in number of times, and from them also I've heard. But personally, let me indicate to you, if we look at 70s, 80s, when I was a student and when I joined the professional service, it's actually unimaginable. The way we are sitting today, the way we talk of the partnership, of the bonding, is something perhaps would have been a dream many years back. And going back in that famous visit of President Clinton to India in 2000, in the current phase, I would say that was perhaps in the recent times the first time when actually the US president touched the people. The United States was always a distant country, and the president was even more distant. The visits used to be mostly to the main metropolis towns. If you recall, that was the first time in a small way he went to Jaipur, and it was much pictured. Take it and contrast it to the recent visit of President Trump. I think the real strength was visible when we see how thousands and thousands of people had come out to listen to the President of the United States, the warmth that was reflective for United States and its president. I think if you actually look into those film or you see that on YouTube, and a lot of it is connected with some of the high-tech area where you have been working, those line of those people were all very young. Today, India is 54% is 27 years and below. That is the real strength. Those are the real backers of United States and India relationship. And that gives me the confidence that in coming years, this will go from strength to strength. At that time, we had seen in late 90s and early 2000. If you remember, that was the time when the high-tech boom had started. A lot of on the area where Mukesh and you live, that was where it was bubbling. A lot of Indian entrepreneurs were beginning to be success. And today, when we see these young innovators, we can see how it has traveled and how much of potential it has for the future. So I'll say that I'm very confident, seeing over years, I've seen a number of crises, and I can say each time when one has gone through a crisis, and I'll not enumerate them here, that every time I feel the confidence of our strong relationship, of our strong bonding, of the similarities of our systems, that we will go ahead and economy will continue to be the real driver between bringing our two countries together. And especially the startups, they are going to be the real future strength. They are going to bring back the economy back to its strength, which today it's almost looking impossible. But I'm sure when we talk 10 years later, we'll look at this time in the same way as we are looking at 90s and 2000.
I share the same vision, and I think almost everybody on this session shares that vision as well. If you could give us an update on the U.S. India trade negotiations, it's one that both countries understand the importance to remove this issue, and the longer issues stayed open, the more likely there are to be problems evolve out of it. Can you share with us what is the current status, and also tell us where we can help as a group to get this trade deal done, because it is so important to send that message to both countries and to remove it as an obstacle as we deal with other issues such as the economy, such as the pandemic, such as defense, et cetera, on us. So an update, Mr. Ambassador, but also what can we do to help in the goals of getting this resolved?
Thank you, John. I continue to be very optimistic about the trade deal, and I must mention that, yes, this current unprecedented challenge has given a bit of a setback in the sense that the focus of all the governments got to tackling the health crisis. But nevertheless, both the trade sides have been in touch. There have been virtual exchanges between both of them. The top leadership has also been talking about it. And I feel that perhaps in coming few weeks, we should be able to strike the smaller trade deal. As you know, the understanding between our leadership was that we will go in for the smaller one and then immediately start negotiations on the larger, on the bigger trade deal between two countries. And on this, I can certainly, and I will draw in on the offer of help which you have given, because this time certainly has made it even more opportune to have these trade deals. And a lot of the trade deal also relates to some of the sectors for which it will be a win-win situation for both the sides. And it will help in the overall confidence building, because during this particular phase, United States and India have been reliable partners. And I think that everybody has seen. In our case, whatever supply chain aspects, especially in pharma sector, which we were involved in, whatever the United States requested us, keeping in view our huge domestic requirements, but it was ensured that all those supplies were supplied and at the same price. I think that has certainly had an impact. That has given confidence here. And I feel that will be playing an important foundation to ensure that this smaller trade deal gets announced soon enough, and then we can move ahead.
Switching directions, and you've been in your role for 4 months, but you have a background, as I said earlier, almost like no other ambassador from the US to India or India to the US has had. What are your priorities? You've been there 4 months. You're thinking about your priorities for this next year and then over the next 3 to 5 years. Can you kind of share with us, and you've hit on several of them earlier, but share with us what are your top priorities and maybe the sequence ranging from immigration to job creation, et cetera, on your focus?
Let me first indicate on the broader sense. John, like you, I'm a very strong believer in United States-India partnership. I was in the past too, and I have seen that grow. But I still believe that it's still tip of the iceberg. We have a long way to go. Certainly, we are in the correct direction. And therefore, the most important thing is that we need to see the broader picture. The broader picture between two of our countries coming together. You have already enumerated, we all are well aware of the similarities in our systems, in the predictability, etc., etc. So on that broader net, we certainly need to be working much closer. Given that, in the immediate sense, as you have asked, my priorities, one, of course, as you have highlighted, is relating to some of the visa issues. And in that, I've been underlining that the Indian Americans in the United States, whether it is the health sector, whether it's the IT in other innovative sectors, they have brought value. They have brought value addition to the United States. And therefore, I am a strong believer that whatever the challenges, political challenges come, but certainly this collaboration will continue, and it may take different mechanisms, it may take different modes, because in the post-COVID economy and economic world, you will see as our lives are getting impacted, the economic relationship will also undergo some changes, and new methodologies of cooperation will come through. But nevertheless, that's one of the priorities I have, to convince the American side that it's a win-win situation. And secondly, as you have said, one is the second you have already raised, that is the trade. So that's also an immediate priority. But beyond that, also on investments on both sides. As you are aware that there are good Indian investments here and there are good American investments here in India. We want to certainly ensure that the FDIs rightfully come in India and are comfortable. Whatever glitches are there, those are removed, and we become an important investment destination for US companies. They feel comfortable, and that's another objective which I would be taking your help and all my friends' help.
You know, this session, I could go on for an hour on these topics, and I'm learning so much, and it's a chance for all of us to have a common vision and say, what can we do to accomplish really ambitious goals? But unfortunately, we're running out of time. So I'd like to ask the last question of you, Mr. Ambassador, which is, teach us a little bit about do's and don'ts. We tend to be, by nature in business, let's get it happen, and why can't it happen faster? Give us advice on how we can help India, you, and the US achieve its goals together. What are the mistakes perhaps we'll make? What should we do better? And if you were to enlist the people, both the large companies and the small companies, in this virtual meeting today, here's the vision you'd like for us to help you with, what would it be?
I think on both sides, John, we certainly need to learn from our experiences of how to do business in both the countries. Like in India, like in the United States, when I'm talking to the senators, the congressmen, I always tell them that the broader picture of India needs to be kept in mind. That it's a democratic polity, the direction is clear, it's moving in the positive side, and sometimes the pace may not be satisfying. But the satisfaction is that the direction is clear. And once it's moving that way, it will continue. And that's the strength of the democratic systems with other institutions like the courts, etc., etc. As far as in United States, as far as India is concerned, I think you and your organization are pretty solid masters on that. I would only request and urge people to have patience. That look at the pronouncements of my Prime Minister. They are very clear. They are as clear as can be. Even on the area of the startups, even right now, at the time India is in middle of the pandemic, but the Prime Minister has been taking the leadership, especially on ensuring that the reform agenda is moved ahead. And to that extent, we will greatly appreciate any inputs we can get from your partners, your associates, the US business, that these are the difficulties we are facing, and I assure you that we will take them up very quickly. Like in the case during the pandemic, the Indian side, there were specific organizations which focused, part of the government which focused in creating and ensuring that the supply chains and whatever other difficulties the US companies were facing, reaching out to the state governments, to the local governments, including my commerce department here, we were very much available. And we tried our best to ensure that whether they were curfew passes or ensuring opening of some of the critical sectors, those were undertaken. And we will continue doing that. Through you, I just once again want to assure that the embassy here is at your service. We certainly look forward to hearing the inputs from you, and we will faithfully communicate those. Not only communicate those, we will also push that those are undertaken and people realize the importance of this relationship.
You know, we're so honored, Mr. Ambassador, to have in Prime Minister Modi one of the people, and everybody knows this on the call, that I think is in the top 3 leaders, government leaders of my lifetime, and understanding the importance of a digital India, a digital world, but also strategic relationship between our countries, large companies, small companies working together to create the jobs, and to do something that almost anyone else would say would be impossible. Yet we can come together and I think change the future of our 2 countries and every citizen in the countries as well as the world. I want to thank you, deeply indebted for the time that you spent today. It's a partnership that we will have for life. We will hit bumps along the way, and that will actually cause us to be even stronger together. So it's an honor. And once again, please everyone join me for thanking the ambassador.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Just tell me when it's go time and we're on.
Go Vinod. Go.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Vinod Muthukrishnan. I am the co-chair of the USISPF Startup Connect program. Now, we're all here because there's a very significant global movement afoot, in case you missed it. The defining global relationship of the 21st century between the United States and India just found itself a massive catalyst, and it's one of many. Now, like with any groundbreaking story, there is some very interesting data behind the scenes that's emerging. And it is my absolute privilege to give you a sneak peek into that data that's emerging. So if you could present the slides, please, I'd love to show what we're learning. Now, we sampled slide, we took 12 startups that form the baseline of what we define as what it takes to transition the US-India corridor, which includes 4 of our own startups, Freshworks, Unifor, CRM Next, and MindTickle. We looked at the data around them. What do they do? What's their scale? What kind of jobs they're creating? And we found some unbelievably beautiful things. So if we go to the next slide, let's look at what these startups symbolize collectively. Now, these are typically B2B startups. They typically have received Series B of funding and above, have offices in the US. So typically they've started in India, they've moved to the US. The founders have moved anywhere between 1 to 3 years ago. In some cases, the founders have not yet moved. So 7 out of these 12 founders are in the United States right now. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see data that backs these startups. Between these startups, they have a total funding of close to $1 billion. That's the capital invested into these companies. And the job creation data is significant. Now, 6,000 jobs globally, 634 jobs in the United States and counting. And the most significant part of that is that a lot of this job creation in the United States has happened over the last 12 to 18 months. Now, all of this is on the back of 16 non-immigrant visas that have been sponsored over the last few years. Now, if you go to the next slide, I want to really summarize what we've learned. And this truly opened my eyes, even though I'm part of that movement. For every single non-immigrant visa given to one of these founders or their core team members, there are 40 American high-paying jobs created. The median salary is $175,000, which is 3x the national average. But like with any win-win relationship, you need to have prosperity and job creation on both sides of the spectrum. For every non-immigrant visa, there's 40 high-paying American jobs at 3x the median average being created in the United States and 8 jobs being created in India. So if I had to define a win-win relationship, this would probably be the data that I would put forth to you. Now, any fast-growing ecosystem would not be able to be fast-growing if it didn't have some challenges. So if you go to the next slide, we want to quickly capture some of the challenges these startups face. And we know over time, most of them will get cleared, of course. So the next slide has some things we've identified on the US and the India side. On the India side, we find that being able to directly list in global exchanges is something that we want to take on. Sean, if you could just go to the next slide, please. So we find that global listing is of great significance to most of these companies. A tax-free reorg is something that needs to be considered because as companies start in a jurisdiction and find that the theater of their business moves globally or centers in the United States, which typically is the case, they do need to reorganize. And a very small but significant change in India, which is the ability to put cards on file, and rather the inability to, actually prevents any SaaS recurring revenue credit card business to even set up and run billing out of India. On the US side, we obviously look forward to some work around immigration, because as I showed you before, this is a class of visa seekers who create 40 jobs in the US and 320 in India for every single visa. I want to also highlight 2 things that you didn't see there. One, obviously, is we all know the ancillary impact of every single job creation on the informal sector in terms of the support these jobs give. But the second thing is, in our conversations with most of these startups, we know that all of them are on course to doubling the US headcount in the next 12 to 18 months. So this is significant data that I wanted to leave with you as you look at the US-India corridor and why startups are defining the next generation of relationship. Now, I want to move on to the next session. It is my absolute privilege, and I was telling somebody earlier that I'd be lying if I said I was not having a fanboy moment as I introduce our next couple of speakers. Now, if I read out the next speaker's accolades, we'll probably run out of time, but I'll stick with what I know everybody knows and acknowledges. He's been hailed as a transformational leader, a passionate mentor, an innovative entrepreneur, and in his latest avatar, an economic statecraft guru. It is my absolute privilege to welcome on your screens Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment, Mr. Keith Crabb, in conversation with our very own Chairman of the USISPF, Mr. John Chambers. The conversation is around economic diplomacy enabling startups. So hold on for just a second as we battle the demo gods and have these gentlemen on screen. Over to you, gentlemen.
Bino, thank you very much. And Keith, I originally thought we'd be doing a fireside chat with your State Department employees first before you did this session on the West Coast. But I can't thank you enough for being here. You're one of us. You've been with the large companies, which USISPF represents. You've been with the startups. You then decided to give back to our country and to move into the State Department, probably at one of the most exciting times, and little did we know how exciting it would be, and have what I think is going to be at the core of our future, not just of our two-country relationship, but to the stability and growth of each country, which is how do we get the economic engine back on track? How do we grow and the role there? So if I can impose on you first, thank you for being here. And with your normal candor, could you outline your top priorities in terms of, even though you've only been a year since you were confirmed, but your top priorities in terms of what you're focused on, and we'll lay the foundation for the follow-on questions for the whole audience.
You got it, John. And by the way, first of all, thanks so much to you and Mukesh for having me. And thanks for that kind introduction. And I want to thank all the participants today, and especially all the outstanding entrepreneurs. And it's been a whirlwind year, no doubt about that. And John, coming into government is just like starting a company. The most important role of the CEO is to build a high-performance team. And I'm really proud of the team that we've been able to put together to run economic diplomacy for the United States. And if you look at this team, I always believe that the organization with the best people wins. So I brought in 10 folks from the private sector, folks from DocuSign, Ariba, Rasna, General Motors. I brought in a captain of the Navy. I brought in an assistant secretary of defense, and somebody was in the CIA. I even brought in the dean of engineering from Purdue, my old alma mater. And now this is complemented with over 3,000 economic officers who are from the career foreign service and the civil service. And I think, as you know, diversity of thought is the catalyst for genius. And the one thing I just want to add is everybody asks me, hey, what's it like, working in Washington? I go, everybody asks me that from Silicon Valley. I go, well, not as you think. And I think the biggest aha, I was absolutely blown away by the career foreign service officers and the civil service. They're some of the smartest people I've ever met. They speak 4 to 7 languages. They're mission driven. They work their tail off. I tell the guys in Silicon Valley, makes you guys look lazy. And I have so much respect for them. And I always say, just like when you see somebody who served in the military and you thank them for their service, you see a civil servant or you see a career foreign service officer do the same thing. So, with building that high performance team, John, the number one, you need really 3 factors to get everybody working together as a team. You need a noble cause, which we have, which is global economic security and national security. You also need a rival, and we've got that in terms of the Communist Party's economic aggression, and you're seeing it play out during the pandemic. You're seeing it play out in Hong Kong, and then you need a plan. And so what we've developed is the economic security strategy for the United States. And those pillars are focused around, the first one, we made a pivot in terms of the pandemic. It's keep America running, keep America safe, keep America healthy, innovating, learning, working. And then the second pillar of that is keep America strong and safeguard its assets. So, and about economic competitiveness. The third pillar is all about building a network of trusted partners. And this is the other key thing. It's a great parallel with the private sector. That's an extension of your team. And we'll talk more about this later on, but it comes in the form of our economic prosperity network. And that is comprised of like-minded countries, like India's at the absolute top of the list, and companies and civil society that operate under a set of trust standards. And those trust standards are things like integrity, accountability, transparency, respect for rule of law, respect for sovereignty of nations, respect for property, respect for the planet, respect for human rights, respect for labor. And it's along all areas of economic collaboration. So that is the big focus that we're up to in the United States State Department. In the federal government, they call me the E because I'm the economic growth guy.
Yes.
But it's been an incredible experience and an absolute privilege of my life to pay back this great country that's given so much to my family and to me.
Keith, I want to thank you. Very often in the Valley, as you know, we tend to view Washington as arm's length. And when we don't get involved, we get what we deserve from it. And it's an issue that I think our country is united behind in terms of the role that U.S. and India can really make in this future. So share with us a little bit how the U.S. and India, and take us down one step further in terms of what we could really do together under your economic vision. You understand, as I alluded to earlier, is the role of government, which many of us are frustrated with moving slow at times, but yet this government's moved remarkably fast. You and I took, 17 years to get tax changes done in the US. India took 6 months on it. So we can learn from each other on this. But if you were to say, in terms of the economic security of the US and India, how are they intertwined and where does it fit into your bigger picture goal?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any doubt from the standpoint of the United States government that India is at the top of the list in terms of trusted partners. And you could see that by just the relationship that President Trump and President Modi have, and the general friendship that they have. And if you look at what the economic engine is in the United States, and I think also in India, it's one of innovation. And that's where the jobs get created. And if you look at the Silicon Valley companies, you look at high tech companies, I would say probably those companies have some tie with India. Just look at the top CEOs, who's running these companies. You just rattle off the list with Satya Nadella and Shantanu and Ajay, who, by the way, I still can't believe they went to the same public high school in India. You got Sundar. It is remarkable. And so I think that economic tie-up, particularly in the area of innovation, I think is key. And, you do business with people that you trust. And there's so many close cultural ties, it just makes it a natural fit.
What are the biggest challenges? How do we address some of the issues on green cards and visas and things of that type? How do we get this trade deal pushed through, even though that's not your area of responsibility? But how do we get some of the smaller hurdles that can trip us up so we can focus on the bigger issue, which is job creation of 1.2 million in new jobs per month? And in the US, how do we recover the 20% unemployment level brought upon us from what was a tremendously strong economy, strongest one in probably 2 decades, that is now tripped a little bit?
Right. And by the way, I think you stated the challenge very well. I mean, these are tough times during the pandemic. And you and I are very like-minded in this area. As we were talking yesterday, being the former chairman of Purdue University, biggest engineering school in the country, I attended so many graduation sessions, and probably 35% of the PhDs in engineering come from India. And I think it's a bipartisan issue that we'd love to be able to, stamp that green card right to their diplomas. And there's no doubt about it that the shortage we have in Silicon Valley is the number of qualified engineers. So it is really a natural fit. I know there's it's a very complex issue, and it's one I think we continue to beat the drum on. And then also the tie between the companies, just like Vinod was saying, to be able to transfer back and forth and have dual headquarters and those kind of things, it creates not only a lot of jobs in India, but it creates a lot of jobs in America.
I don't know.
A topic that is directly related, and it's one that both surprises me and disappoints me. You remember when you and I first started to get to know each other, I was a huge backer of China. And in mid-1990s, I bet a large part of Cisco's future on a partnership with China, joint manufacturing, et cetera, and it worked very, very well. There was always a win-win mentality on both sides, however, even though the Chinese were very tough negotiators, on how did both sides win together. Unfortunately, that has now evolved into a win-lose mentality on it, and it's one that I do not think serves the world well at all. But kind of the big elephant in the room is what should India and the US ideally do together to be able to balance this and to protect the security of both countries? And how do you do this in a win-win fashion, but realize the cultures are different between the countries? India has a boundary that is all across China that is very important and very fragile. What should we be doing together, and everything from economic stability here to defense and environment stability? Your thoughts?
Yeah. And by the way, John, I think the elephant in the room is China, and it is with my bilateral discussions with literally every nation that I talk to when I'm talking to my counterparts. And if you look at China and their malign regime and their aggressive tactics, the first thing I want to say, it's not the country of China, it's not the people of China, it's Chinese Communist Party. And Secretary Pompeo has said, is America really facilitated their rise. But now we've seen that they don't honor agreements. I think Hong Kong is a perfect example of that. They've been in economic war with the United States for over 40 years. My eyes were opened up coming to the government. Growing up in Ohio, my dad had a 5-person machine shop, and there was five of us in the good times too, in the tough times. And I saw what the weapons of mass production from China did. They just gutted our SME business, is the heart of our economic engine. I saw General Motors, when you build a plant over in China, you're not just handing them the blueprints, but you're teaching them the process engineering and training their people. And then obviously in Silicon Valley, we see that intellectual property theft everywhere. And so, this is such a big issue. Now that I've been in the government, I understand the magnitude of it. And then it's been so systematic over these years. And what's interesting is the president has woken up, I think, the United States in terms of China's aggressive tactics and the realization that the Communist Party, they have two goals. One is regime preservation. The other is to be the dominant global superpower by 2049, their 100th anniversary. And I think during the pandemic, now this has really woken the world up in terms of their three-pronged strategy of concealment, co-option, and coercion. So if you look at the pandemic itself is a result of concealment of the virus. It should have never happened, or it should have never happened to the extent that it did. The other area is co-option. People are understanding that China's co-opted economies by entangling supply chain. You just look at areas like pharmaceuticals and those kind of things where they have a lockhold on much of that. And then if you look at their so-called face mask diplomacy, where this is a tool of seduction and coercion, where they're going around to countries asking them to do things that they always want them to do before the pandemic. And if they don't do it, they go to the bottom of the list for their PPE. And I think citizens of the world don't like that, and they're realizing that. And that's given a lot of political will to government officials. So I think now the mask literally has been removed, and we can see them how they truly are. And I think that's another thing that Secretary Pompeo said, that we have to take off our rose-colored glasses and treat them not how we hope they will be, but how they are. And the tight relationship between India and the U.S. on so many different fronts. You know, I had the privilege of sitting in on the Quad meeting with Secretary Pompeo and his counterparts, the ministries of foreign affairs for India, Australia, and Japan. And, you know, they were completing each other's sentence. It was so tight. And then from an economic standpoint, global economic security, that is critical because, you know, if you look at what China's strategy has been, and they say it themselves, it's seduce with money and reinforce with intimidation, retaliation. And they retaliate against companies, they retaliate against countries. And all I know is that when you know, strength is derived from solidarity and unity. And for example, that's one of the big impetuses between the Economic Prosperity Network. So I think, you know, we know as the United States, we can't take on this malign regime by themselves. We need like-minded nations like India, and we also need the private sector as well.
You know, Keith, one of the cool things about you coming with a major technology background is we understand every country will be a digital country. And candidly, Prime Minister Modi was one of the first leaders in the world from turning that from a thought to a implementation, digital manufacturing, supply chain partner, et cetera. If you look at the future of which countries will create the most jobs, and if India and the US want to lead together on it, it's the companies who do the best job on digitization, the best job on Internet of Things, the best job on artificial intelligence, the best job on 5G, and candidly semiconductors, which are back in vogue, not as a standard product, but you put in a lot of the unique capabilities into silicon, complemented by software. Your thoughts on what we should be doing together, because there is not and has not ever been a lot of technology leadership in thinking in Washington about, if we don't win these technology battles, we're not going to create jobs for our people in our country, and our standard of living drops in both countries. Your thoughts here on what we could do together?
Yes, and I think that's a great point, because Prime Minister Modi's done a tremendous job in terms of putting innovation, the digital transformation, all of that at the forefront, and job creation. And if you look at our economic security strategy, and that is, turbocharge economic competitiveness, a big part of that is accelerating the digital transformation, investing in the workers themselves, increasing access to capital. So I think collaboration is absolutely key. One of the bills that's going through Congress right now is $100 billion R&D fund that Senator Schumer and Senator Young have put together on a bipartisan basis. And one of the things that we did is we showed how we believe we can get that up to $1 trillion with matches from the private sector and also from our closest technological allies. So there's things like that that we can really collaborate on together. I also think too, a big area of collaboration between United States and India is safeguarding our assets. And that's, intellectual property. It's the technology. Because, the Communist Party goes around and they've been buying up some of the most precious assets. I mean, John, you've seen that all the time. And those kind of things. And also in the economic security strategy, we identified 10 critical sectors, and they're the ones that and several of them you mentioned: semiconductors, advanced telecommunications, autonomous vehicles, biotechnology, quantum computing. All of these, cybersecurity, all these key areas are areas where India has great strength. And I think the synergy between India and the United States, this is a 1 + 1 = 3. This is not even a win-win deal. This is a multiplier. It may even be exponential. And here again, I really think it's the diversity of thought is the catalyst for genius.
Keith, I could go on and on with you today, and you were kind enough on your first trip since you've been in Washington back to Silicon Valley to spend time with us today. I want to thank you for that, but maybe in your closing thoughts, outline what the vision could look like our countries working together. Outline the vision that maybe because of your background, which I've alluded to several times, of a startup, a big company, working with government, that we often try to keep arm's length, and all of a sudden realize if we work together, we can do this to the benefit of all the citizens in ways that I think many people haven't grasped. So maybe your both parting thoughts, but secondly, a call to action to the people in this virtual meeting about what we could do to help in this economic vision, which I share with you for our two countries and for the world.
Yeah, well, John, on that trip where I hosted Secretary Pompeo out in Silicon Valley for 4 days, and I had you seated right next to him, at dinner at my home with the other 36 CEOs. One of the things we talked about in terms of the China challenge is the threat to democracies are real and urgent around the world. India is the largest democracy in the world. And if there's anything I've learned, that democracy is an unnatural act. It's against all the laws of physics. The natural state of things is the emperor, the bad king, the dictator. So it's being ever vigilant. And one of the things clearly that's been stated by the Communist Party is they recognize the battleground is high tech. And as we said, to that group of CEOs, corporate responsibility is not just social responsibility, as we used to say. It's also global economic security. And I think this is absolutely key in terms of the path we carve out in the future with great allies, particularly great technological allies like India. And they've just been such a great partner. I know you do, and I do as well, have such a deep, profound respect for the country of India, for their leaders, for their entrepreneurs, for their culture in itself. And I think a big area of my focus, and one where I see tremendous opportunity, is building that bridge between Washington and Silicon Valley, building that bridge between Washington and India, and realizing that this is probably one of the biggest Delta opportunities. I was doing a fireside chat with Nadia Shaldo, one of the authors of the National Security Strategy at Hudson Institute, and she called me a walking public-private partnership, and I wear that badge with honor. So, anything we can do, we will do backflips. And we got a great team. We've got a tremendous ambassador in Ken Jester in India. We've got great economic officers there. We're at your disposal. And by the way, the other thing too, this is what I tell everybody is, don't be afraid to be prescriptive. Everywhere I go, I always ask for advice or how can we help you more? And we've got really some big brain people and a lot of muscle at the United States State Department. So at the end of the day, it's all about service and service to these two great nations. So John, I thank you. I thank Mukesh. I thank Vinod for giving me this opportunity to speak with y'all.
Well, Keith, it's an honor to be your friend for life on that. And I think our ability to interface to you as one of our champions in Washington means a great deal to all of us. On the short term, clearly, we've got some little bumps and we've got to get it solved in terms of green cards and visas and immigration, especially for those that Vinod and Umesh articulated so well, are going to generate jobs in both countries and the economic security we need. And then we got to kind of push through this trade policy issue. It's a stumbling block. We're close, and I know it's not your area of responsibility, but if you could help on that. In total, we'll try to come back to you in ways that we can help, and I'd like for you to continue to push and challenge us. Once again, as your friend, and thank you for giving back to our country and to both countries. Mukesh, back to you.
Thank you very much, John and Keith. I just wanted to thank you as an old friend and as an old boss. You always have been gracious with your time and wisdom. And thank you. I also want to welcome Shantanu Narayen of Adobe, Chairman, for the next session, and also Raj Subramaniam. Keith, thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Mukesh. And it's just so great to be working with you again. And it was really a great honor to have a fireside chat with John Chambers, my lifelong mentor for 20 years. So I wish you all the well and Godspeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'll see you in DC soon.
You got it.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, let me just welcome Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening in India. I know we have a large audience across the geography itself, and I'm delighted and honored to have Shantanu Narayen, Chairman, President, CEO of Adobe, and Raj Subramaniam, who's the President, CEO of FedEx Corporation, and both are also on the board of USISPF, and John is there on the standby, who's been chairing the session. We do have you both running large global corporation, and we will talk more about leadership in post-COVID world itself. And while US has seen a large impact, and we have roughly 40 million unemployed in the US, India also has seen a large impact, and we have roughly 125 million people unemployed in India. And I think it's important that things will change, as we talked about in the earlier session. Corporations and employees will have to operate in a different manner, so there'll be a new norm. So I'm going to invite Umesh Sachdev, founder and CEO of Unifor, to have a session with both of you to talk about leadership in the post-COVID-19 world itself. Umesh, over to you.
Thank you, Mukesh. I want to start by stealing some thoughts from my colleague Vinod, who, while introducing John Chambers and Keith Krog, has said this is a fanboy moment for him. This couldn't get any bigger for me. To have Raj, Chief Operating Officer FedEx, and Shantanu, CEO of Adobe, the opportunity to spend the next 30 minutes talking about leadership with you guys, not just for me, but all of the startups who are watching us live on YouTube, Shantanu and Raj, and many business leaders. This is truly a unique opportunity, and I know it was not easy to find time for both of you, but thank you for giving us the priority and an opportunity today. The amazing thing about both of you, for some of us startup founders to learn, with Raj spending 28 years at FedEx and Shantanu, you with 21 years at Adobe, that's a lesson in itself in perseverance that most of us startup founders, with our short attention span, etc., need to learn from you. My own mentor, John, is another one, just like yourself, on it. In the morning, Shantanu and Raj, we had the Indian ambassador and also Keith in conversation with John. And through the morning, we've heard that how this is a new normal. Even the time you spent with the 5 CEOs in preparation for this session, you both alluded to how FedEx and Adobe are now adjusting to this new normal, new product innovations, work adjustments, work from home, etc. One of the things that's emerged in consensus is the engine of job creation is less likely to be the large businesses, but more likely to be the startup engine in both countries. Also, personally, I founded my own startup, Unifor, in 2008. So founding the company from one recession to coming here, my own life lesson has been that one learns most in these events. You learn how to be nimble and adjust. So with that, I want to open your thoughts in terms of how, as business leaders, startup leaders, government leaders, need to think about first tackling and blocking the current situation. And as we get out of it, how do we think ahead and prepare ourselves for the new normal and the new growth? If I were to start with coming to each one of you, starting with you, Raj, both your thoughts on what we are seeing right now, and from as a champion of the US-India ties, what role would you see startups playing in furthering these ties between the two countries?
Well, thank you, Umesh. And again, it's great to be here. And I know I've been in FedEx for 28 years, and I've never actually found a reason to leave. And if somebody had told me when I joined this company that I would be here doing this 28 years from then, I thought I had a better chance of playing in the Indian cricket team. But such as it is, this turned out to be a very exciting venture for me. So now, in terms of you talked about preparing. Yeah, it's a lot of effort and attention. And right now, we're fighting this pandemic war, and we find ourselves in the front lines of this war. But however, there are, at the same time, we also putting in place things that we need to prepare for the peace that comes afterwards. So, I mean, a lot of judgment has to come into play here and figure out where, some of the markers might lie, and then start to, or move rapidly towards that direction. And, hopefully the judgment is right. And in many cases, as I said in the previous conversation, we were already skating to where the puck was going to be, but the puck came at us in a more rapid fashion than we thought. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for innovation here, and especially as in our position, we are definitely looking at the intersection of physical and digital spaces and trying to figure out how we really take that forward in the technological advancement in this time frame. And that's where startups play a significant role, because usually startups are much more innovative, they're much faster, and big companies have the brand and the scale. And I think that's where the opportunity to connect. And India is a fantastic place right now in terms of having the right skill set to bring that to the fore. You just have to look in this call and in the previous conversation we had. It's very exciting folks who are bringing new things to the table and have the opportunity to scale up working with large companies hand in hand to provide that value. So that's where I think the startup community can be a superb bridge between US and India. And as the world political dynamics are changing, the US-India relationship is going to get stronger. It's even is going to get much stronger. And I think startups play a huge role, especially in aiding innovation and speed to market for large companies.
Thank you, Raj, for your thoughts. Shantanu, similar thoughts on dealing with the current pandemic and the financial crisis and the role you see startups playing in US-India ties?
Well, first, Umesh, like Raj, I just wanted to thank all of you for having Raj and me on this session today. It's actually been a privilege to participate in what Mukesh and John have done, which is actually the creation of a new startup to really drive, even more significant ties between the US and India. And so I just I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge John and Mukesh's efforts to do this. So thank you for having me. I think as it relates to the importance of startups, there's no question that the lifeblood of any country is new venture creation. And last time I checked, Umesh, every business starts as a $0 billion business. And so, startups are truly the lifeblood of an economy. And anything that people can do to foster startups through events like this will only appeal not just to the US economy, but also to the Indian economy. So I wanted to say that. I think from my perspective, if you're a startup, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. I mean, we all realize we're going through unprecedented times, but unprecedented times are actually the best times for disruption. And so whether you're a large company like Raj at FedEx or me at Adobe, or whether you're a small company, everything is up in the air. How people engage with customers is up in the air. How distance learning happens is going to be up in the air. Supply chains up in the air. AI is up in the air. And so I think, for us at Adobe, what we're really thinking about during this pandemic is first to acknowledge that these are unprecedented times, to certainly focus on our employees first and foremost, because they are the intellectual capital that we have in a company. But then to really start to look around the corner and imagine the possibilities of what this pandemic is going to create in terms of new opportunities, because we are not going to go back to the old normal, whether it's how you work, whether it's how you shop, whether it's how you consume entertainment, whether it's how you travel. And so I think those are going to represent, Umesh, just very, very significant opportunities. And what startups have always demonstrated is resiliency and a nimbleness. And so I think we are trying to, frankly, we talk about bringing Sandhill Road, which for those of you in the Bay Area know is sort of the hotbed of venture creation in this country. If we can bring that to Adobe and foster that kind of nimbleness and looking around the corner, this is just one of those unique opportunities in time.
Excellent. Picking up from both of your thoughts, as Raj said, this is a great opportunity for innovation, and Shantanu, you reiterated that this is an opportunity not worth missing. Um, as I think about what's happening, say at a smaller scale with my customers, and we do artificial intelligence in call centers for enterprises, and most of my customers who I'd say were fence sitting on digitization, AI, automation, are now finding themselves having to accelerate some of those journeys and making that their new normal. So maybe Shantanu, starting with you, and then Raj, I'll come to you. But Shantanu, both within Adobe and how you're rethinking, positioning some of your products or the stack that gets put out in the marketplace, what are the trends you're seeing in terms of digitization, especially the impact that COVID is having on large enterprises thinking about, artificial intelligence, automation, etc.?
The conversation that's happening in not just corporate America, but corporations all around the world is following a couple of different vectors, Umesh. The first vector is around employee well-being, and we touched on that in the last session. And how you can make employees productive at home. I mean, whether it's what we are engaging in right now, which is video conferencing and other technologies that enable the employees to be productive. I think that's a massive trend, and Adobe has certainly created a trend which allows people to work from home. But this notion of making employees productive when they're not all physically together in the same location, I think that's going to represent a whole bunch of opportunities. You're certainly seeing whether it's Microsoft Teams or Slack or what we provide with Adobe PDF and Acrobat, a whole bunch of opportunities to engage and make people more productive. So I think that's one big theme. The second big theme is then, because that physical connectivity that corporations relied on to engage with customers is not going to go back to being just a physical engagement, but is going to be increasingly digital. How do you engage with your customers digitally? How do you create that personalized experience? How do you create a business model, perhaps, that's a subscription-based business model that gives you more resiliency in times of these economic duress? And so I think, these two big trends that we see, first with respect to employees, and then, that cuts across different sectors, because whether that's telemedicine or education for employees, or then engagement with customers, those are two that are particularly near and dear to our heart. And the third one I would talk about is, Adobe has certainly been known as one of the companies that's fostered creativity. And a lot of people talk about engaging and making people productive, but the world without creativity would be a really boring place. And we're really focused a lot on wherever inspiration strikes. How can you be more creative, more campaigns? We're all being entertained more within the confines of our house. And so those are three trends that are particularly close to what we stand for as a company and our purpose. And that's maybe the last thing I would say, going back to your purpose as a company and saying, given what your purpose or mission is, how do these provide tailwinds? I think that's where companies capitalize on the current situation.
Excellent. Raj, as you and I have recently spoken about how the shift in business more towards e-commerce at FedEx and digitization, etc. What are the trends from a FedEx experience? And you touch almost every business in the world. What are you seeing out there?
So I think, in terms of digitization in particular, that's a key strategy going forward, is how we figure, we're sitting on a lot of data, as well as supply chain data around the world. Talking about startups, our founder chairman, he talked about information about the package being as important as the package itself. That's not profound today, but he said that in 1979. And that invented tracking and tracing. When the internet came along, we were the first application on the internet. And that DNA is with us. So we have a very strong technological background. It's time to really get FedEx 2.0. And looking at the network effects of our physical networks and network effects of our data. So especially on supply chain, we're sitting on a lot of information at the customer level, at an aggregate level, that we can create a lot of value for our customers and indeed all our stakeholders. So that's one set. The other thing that is going really fast now is e-commerce. I mean, we were investing ahead of this trend, and what we're supposed to see in 3 years happened in a matter of 3 weeks. And we're not going backwards. There will be some fallback, but it's not going to go back to where it was. And to put it in perspective, in the United States, 15% of retail was e-commerce pre-COVID. In April, that number moved to 25%. It's a step change, and I think it's going to fall somewhere in that space. And so it's going to be it's going to be huge. Now the thing here is our traditional customers are B2B customers, and they are small, medium, and large businesses, and there are about 20 or 30 million of them in the U.S. and different numbers globally. But the consumers, 300 million. So there's a 10x factor that we have to now deal with the consumers who are not our customers. They're really our customers, but they're a huge influencer in the way we interact. And the only answer to do this is technology. That is the only way that we are able to scale that 10x. And so we are doing a lot of things. We have something called FedEx Delivery Manager, which is, over the last 6 weeks, we've seen millions of new registrants into that system and platform. And we're putting forward new things. So the world is changing rapidly in front of us. And we know for sure that technology and digital innovation and data are the hallmarks for success in the future.
If I may just add to what Raj said, because it spurred a thought. I mean, as you know, we were one of the first companies to completely disrupt ourselves and move from selling boxes to selling software completely through a subscription-based business. And what Raj said, I think, is really profound, which is we have created a culture where everything is based on data. We call it our data-driven operating model. And I think the importance of data and the importance of storytelling for startups, where if you're not using the data of how your customers are dealing with you, and that is only enabled by digital, as Raj said, I think you're going to be disadvantaged and you're operating blind. And so I think this importance of data and how you think about data as an asset, much like you would think about a physical building or anything else, and how do you put that interaction with a customer on your balance sheet, I think is a very powerful idea.
This is exactly where I want to go next, Shantanu. What I've heard from both of you in the last few minutes is that even at your scales over these years, you've had a couple of moments where you've had to, say, pivot the direction of the company, pivot some cultural aspects. I'm sure Adobe didn't have a strong data culture from the inception, but over time, you pivoted. The shift, Shantanu, in your case, from the license model of selling to software as a service. True story, every time I've raised a round of funding, I use your public market valuation to negotiate how we should be valued as well. So it's been a great case study of how it should be done. As all startup founders, some find themselves having to make a hard pivot in COVID, and some just for evolution as the next stage of growth, as companies go from, say, Series B, C to go pre-IPO and then IPO, there are new evolutions. As leaders of large organizations, how do you prepare your teams, your companies, for a shift change in say, things that people may have been used to for many years, and now you're asking them to do something new? Shantanu, your thoughts first, and then I'll come back to you, Raj, as well.
Well, first, Umesh, if you've been using Adobe to get increased valuations, I still haven't seen my commission, but I'm sure the check is coming through a FedEx package to my house. So, we'll have that one. Just a couple of quick thoughts, Umesh. I mean, the first one is that in technology, more so than anywhere else, every business is an S-curve. And if you don't recognize that preserving the status quo is not a business strategy, you're just, delusional. And so I think, for all leaders, recognizing that we want them to be creators and not custodians is, I think, one of the ways culturally that we are trying to create this notion of the expectation for a leader is you're going to look around the corner and you're going to try and disrupt yourself before somebody else disrupts you, because everybody who's attending the session is probably looking at FedEx and Adobe and Cisco the way John created it and said, how do I get a piece of that pie? And so I think recognizing that businesses have this natural evolution in an S-curve. The power in organizations tend to be where you're making the money today, but the future sometimes is in those new and nascent businesses. So I think having that culture of recognizing that things are going to change, and a culture of experimentation and intellectual curiosity. And I think people do what Raj and John and I, what we inspect, people look at that, not what we expect. And so if you inspect new businesses, if you send the message that it's okay to experiment, if you send the message that, we want people to try different things, that's how you create this culture of innovation. Because I always say, while Raj and I are more cricket fans, I would say, than baseball fans, in baseball, you go to the Hall of Fame batting 300. So you fail 7 times out of 10. And if you can create a culture where you're allowing people that freedom, that luxury, that expectation to experiment, I think that's how you create a culture which continuously reinvents itself.
Yeah. So let me just, let me add to what Shantanu just said. First of all, I've been talking to Shantanu for many, many years. And when I think we were doing the very first conversation is when he recounted basically what he had done with Adobe. And that is one of the most stunning pivots of corporate history. I think it's just been just incredible. So there's a lot I've learned from him over the years, and how to think completely differently. So it's just been fascinating to watch. And then as Adobe has gone from success to success. And when we sit, in our field here is, it's just it's interesting how when I talk to a lot of students and universities and so on and so forth, how people take for granted the movement of atoms around the world, and the movement of bits and bytes. Now that's very sexy. Somehow, picking a package from or any freight or whatever from any part of the world and depositing it in any other part of the world in a matter of 1 or 2, 3 business days, that seems to be that's table stakes, or that's something that you can do. You can do it. I guarantee you that's very difficult to do. And but somehow we have to tell our story very, very differently, and then figure out the value that we can create again at the space or the atoms and the bits and bytes intersect. So we in terms of how to do it, is what your question was. I think Shantanu had said it very well. I mean, we have to find create that vision, and then find leaders in the organization who can take that vision forward. You may have to try a few times and find. But once you find the right structure, the right organization construct, then you got to go, and you just have to back them. And that's what we have done here, especially in the last year or so, is just really let them go and try to operate like a startup within a big business, and not to constrain them with all kinds of rules and regulations. Because here the opportunities between the interstitial spaces in collaboration, trying to look across industries, and we're going to find new value. And you've got to let the folks, and especially new folks, come into the organization, think differently. And all you can do as a leader at that point is remove barriers for execution. So I think Shantanu said it very well. I'm just adding on to what he said.
Well, one cool idea for change here could be to think about a Memphis versus Silicon Valley cricket match, that you both can be the captains of your respective teams, and we can dream to have it in the coming months. Shifting gears, absolutely, I would love to be the referee of that match. On shifting gears on the related topic, how important to both of you, and how much time do you spend on the topic of culture, both in the current times and in general, just as CEO and COO of 2 of the largest businesses that we know on earth? How much of your mental focus goes towards thinking, worrying about culture?
So let me go first on this one. I mean, culture is a very core thing for FedEx. From the very get-go, especially with the founder chairman, the culture of people first has been very much in the books of FedEx, and it's not something that you can discover. Suddenly, you want to start a new culture. It's been over the years it's been built up. And what has come true, especially in this pandemic, is those investments in culture have paid off brilliantly. There is a whole mission of when we're delivering these packages, 500,000 people around the world, and moving all these healthcare equipment and products and test kits and everything else, there's this core notion of this is who we are and this is what we do. And so there's a whole this hashtag FedEx Strong. It's like it's really amazing how it is pervaded through the organization. So to answer your question directly, culture is really number one in our books. Especially in a service business like FedEx, it's hearts and minds of our folks. That's the most important. They are our number one priority. And the difference between 500,000 people doing just what it takes not to get fired versus doing whatever it takes to really go above and beyond the call of duty, that's the difference between success and failure. So for us, culture is all paramount. Eat strategy for breakfast any day.
Raj said it perfectly, Umesh, and all of us as companies, what you aspire to is having a mission or a purpose about what you want to accomplish. But again, he said it beautifully. It's about how you do it that really dictates whether you're going to be successful. I think just adding to one point that Raj said, it's at times like this when people truly understand and appreciate were those words on a piece of paper, or do you believe them, and what's your authentic way of dealing with it? And so your actions at a time like this, Umesh, speak more than anything that you might have said. And I think the great companies will recognize that culture really is the way that you make it tick. And so for all the leaders who are listening, every one of your employees is looking at you even more right now as to how you behave, because this is a time of crisis. It's easy to talk about all of this when things are going swimmingly. And so I'd encourage all of you to write down what's important and make sure that you live those values, because people observe it.
That's a great lesson for all of us who are running our own businesses and companies. But trying to bring it home, last two questions, now getting hyper-focused on startups, as I spoke of the altruistic capitalism mission that all of us startup founders have. First, the conundrum that has faced most startup CEOs for a while, that when we are building products or services, we tend to find partnership opportunities with larger companies. But it's always been this mismatch of 30-40 billion versus 30-40 million. Is it even worth it? And what advice would you give a hyper-growth startup CEO? Is it even worth it for them to spend time? And if it is, then what's the right way?
Raj?
I'm sorry, worth spending time on what? I didn't follow the question.
On a partnership with a larger company, between a startup and a larger company.
Well, my answer is, of course, yes, because I think, especially right now, I think all companies now are looking for new ways. And as Shantanu said earlier, this is the opportunity for disruption. This is the opportunity that minds are open and they're looking for different ways to do things. And here's where startups provide a lot of energy. And I think one of the points that Shantanu said earlier is very important, that you've got to get to the right place in the organization where this is going on. And so that'll be the trick. And that's not easy. I'm not by any stretch of imagination downplaying that. But if you do find it, and you find the areas and you provide the value, and then there's an opportunity to grow together in a win-win, where the big companies can provide you the scale and you can provide the technology and the speed to market. And it's just, there's a place that can happen. So sometimes it may feel more frustrating dealing with a larger company, but if you find the right approach, you find the right breakthrough, I think it's a win-win for all concerned.
I agree. Just adding to what Raj said, I mean, large companies bring the scale, but to Raj's point, the entrepreneur has to do the heavy lifting of recognizing first that it's not a panacea just being associated with a larger company. You have to do the work of saying, how can you really truly help the larger company? From a large company perspective, we see the nimbleness, the can-do attitude, and the ability to, completely pivot at the, overnight as very attractive from a startup, and sometimes it serves as a catalyst to really say what's happening in this next generation of technology. So again, to Raj's point, there's enthusiasm and interest on our part, but as a startup, you have to recognize that it is perhaps a little bit more work because you have to navigate these larger companies. But the payoff can be large if you truly understand how your technology, your people, your service benefits a larger company in addition to yourself. But put yourselves first, because that's what you need to do as a startup.
Thank you for those thoughts, Shantanu and Raj. My final question in closing to both of you. Both of you are board members of USISPF. We've just launched the USISPF Startup Connect program, and I read out the mission. The mission for us is defining US and India as the most important partnership of 21st century driven by startups. Now, most of us startup CEOs are driven, and we get to work every day because we know how to punch way above our weight. And that's how our companies just somehow don't die and keep growing until we reach your scales. If you were to be, dreamers with me, give me, in your words, a big, hairy, ambitious goal, a BHAG, for the startup program between US and India.
Well, first as an... Go ahead, Raj. No, please.
Okay. All right. Let me just say this, that, first of all, on the USISPF, the work that we are doing, we set up a goal, the trade between US and India is somewhere in the $100 billion range. There's, given everything that's going on in the world right now, there is absolutely no reason why that trade could not be 5 or 10x that number. But it's remained a dream for a long time. But there is a unique opportunity here for really the collaboration at various levels, from people to governments, from businesses to government, to get that. And startups are the catalyst to make it happen, especially given the strengths that we are talking about here. So maybe a goal here is that a startup like yours, as part of this community, becomes a $100 billion startup in the next 5 years. Startup goes from startup to somewhere in that range. Why not? Why not think big in terms of a startup from this kind of atmosphere? Rise up to very big heights in terms of opportunities.
I think when I reflect on history, and very famously when the internet first came along and Tom Friedman wrote about the fact that the world was flat, I thought we clearly witnessed the birth of incredible set of companies that crossed the US-India border, whether it was Infosys or TCS or Cognizant. That entire services. I think all of us as companies in the pandemic are even more recognizing that there will be perhaps deglobalization, but this war for talent, irrespective of where it is, can only help both economies, the US economy and the Indian economy. So I think it's a perfect time with technology disruption and with an acceptance that work can happen anywhere to create, frankly, that next generation of innovation that fosters both the US economy and the Indian economy. And I hope that, through the initiative that the innovators will demonstrate, with the support from the USISPF, we will create, as Raj said, that next set of 8 or 10 companies that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we will highlight as absolutely, world-moving companies. So good luck.
Shantanu and Raj, first, I love the goal that you're setting for us. What it also does, without you realizing, I at least have one of my board members, John Jim, was keenly listening in, and you made my next board meeting a very interesting one with this new goal. So thank you for that. But I'm so honored that both of you have taken the time today to interact with all of us, and I hope to, without being, and being very respectful of your time, I hope to, continue to seek your advice as we scale up this startup program and create those next 8 to 10 world-leading companies. Thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Shantanu and Raj,
thank you
I
to
want to
you.
jump in too, and thank you both for making a difference. Umesh and Vinod, you make us proud of what the startup future is going to be. And on behalf of USISPF, I love the way the large companies and small companies are working together, dreaming dreams that others might have considered unobtainable, and I think we will obtain it. But just cannot appreciate more your time today. So thank you all.
Thank you, John and Mukesh, for the leadership of USISPF. We've been just thrilled to be part of that, and so it's been terrific. And Shantanu, thank you for being arm in arm here today, and then Umesh and Vinod and the rest of the team, wonderful. So great. I look forward to talking to you all sometime.
Thanks all for having me as well. It really has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Shantanu. Thank you, Raj. Vinod, why don't you just close it?
Yes, sir, I will. So we're in the home stretch now, and it is my privilege to present the vote of thanks on behalf of John, Mukesh, Gaurav, Umesh, and team USISPF. A deep belief in the principles of democracy, coupled with very strong convergence on a host of geopolitical, business, and military matters, have defined the first US-India engagement over the past decade. This multifaceted engagement is now discovering a very powerful new catalyst: cooperation between startups in the US-India tech corridor. A win-win engagement that is generating innovation, jobs, and prosperity in both countries and across the world. The American dream and the Indian one find themselves blissfully intertwined. And Umesh and I, along with the founding startups and advisors of the Startup Connect program, feel privileged to be a part of this movement. We would like to thank the global leaders who took time off their busy calendars to join us. Undersecretary Keith Clark, Ambassador Taranjit Sandhu, the Chairman and CEO of Adobe, Shantanu Narayen, the President and CEO of FedEx, Raj Subramaniam. Thank you, gentlemen. This is invaluable to us. Our progress is greatly enabled by strong leadership in both countries. A sincere thanks to President Trump and Prime Minister Modi for championing the defining relationship of the 21st century, a term you'll hear many times in the years to come. A special thanks to the USISPF crew that's working behind the scenes and has worked tirelessly over the past few weeks to make this event happen. You have our eternal gratitude. Most of all, we thank you all for tuning in. This movement is infinitely richer thanks to your participation. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.